When you stop carrying their pain, everything changes. These words, attributed to the spirit of Carl Jung's insights, are not just poetic but profoundly psychological. Every human being, at one point or another, finds themselves drowning not only in their own sorrows, but also in the sorrows they have inherited from others. We carry wounds that are not ours, tears that belong to other faces, burdens that were placed on our backs before we even knew what choice was. Jung spent his entire life exploring the unseen realms of the psyche, and one of his greatest revelations was that much of what we suffer does not truly originate in us. Instead, it seeps into us through family, through culture, through love, through unspoken contracts we never realized we signed. The moment you stop carrying what was never yours, the moment you release the pain of others that has wrapped around your soul like heavy chains, everything in your life begins to change. It begins with childhood. Imagine a little boy or girl growing up in a house where one parent is constantly sad, burdened by depression, regret, or anger. The child, wanting nothing more than love and safety, begins to sense this heaviness. Without words, without conscious thought, the child makes an agreement. If I carry some of this sadness, maybe mom or dad will smile. If I take it upon myself to fix them, maybe then I will be safe. And so, the burden begins. A child learns to laugh louder to erase the silence of grief, or to stay quiet to avoid triggering rage, or to achieve more to compensate for a parent's broken dreams. What is happening here is not compassion but absorption. The child does not yet know the boundary between self and other. Their nervous system learns that survival means carrying pain that was never theirs, and this pattern often continues for decades. Carl Jung would describe this as the psyche's confusion between the self and the shadow of another. Every person carries a shadow, the unacknowledged, repressed aspects of themselves. But often, instead of facing their own shadow, people unconsciously hand it to those around them. The angry father who never deals with his rage passes it to his son, who grows up feeling an unexplained storm inside. The anxious mother projects her fears into her daughter, who learns to worry about things that are not even hers to fear. Families are not just built of love and blood, but of these invisible transactions of pain. We inherit stories, secrets, unhealed traumas, and carry them as though they were written into our DNA. Yet Jung would remind us that while the collective unconscious shapes us, individuation, the process of becoming truly ourselves, requires us to separate what is ours from what belongs to others. To stop carrying someone else's pain does not mean you stop caring. This is the great misunderstanding. Many resist this truth because they believe letting go makes them cold, heartless, or selfish. But in fact, the opposite is true. When you carry the suffering of others, you rob them of the dignity of their own healing. You interfere with the natural flow of life that requires each soul to confront its wounds. You become a substitute container for what they must eventually face themselves. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This includes accepting one's own wounds without outsourcing them to those around us. When you carry someone else's pain, you delay their encounter with their true self. When you set it down, you create the conditions for transformation. Think about relationships. How many couples live in cycles of blame and rescue? One partner suffers from unhealed trauma, and the other unconsciously takes on the role of healer, constantly patching wounds that reopen again and again. The rescuer feels noble, even righteous, but secretly becomes drained, bitter, resentful. The wounded partner feels temporarily soothed, but never truly changes, because they are not required to face the depth of their own shadow. This is the empathic trap. Empathy is beautiful when it allows us to feel with another, but empathy turns poisonous when it crosses into identification. When we no longer know where their feelings end and ours begin. Jung might call this an inflation of the ego, where the ego believes it must become savior, healer, God. But no one can heal another's soul. You can walk beside them, you can love them, but you cannot carry what is theirs without losing yourself. The workplace provides another stage where this drama plays out. An employee might carry the frustrations of a toxic boss, internalizing the anger directed at them until they believe they are incompetent. A leader may carry the disappointments of their team, believing they alone must bear the weight of every failure. In friendships, we often become emotional sponges, soaking up the endless problems of others, to the point where we no longer know what joy feels like. This habit of carrying others' pain is so normalized that many people think it is the very definition of love or loyalty. But Jungian wisdom teaches us that loyalty to others without loyalty to oneself is betrayal of the soul. The cost of this hidden loyalty is immense. Psychologically, it manifests as anxiety, depression, and confusion about identity. People wake up one day realizing they have built an entire life not on their own desires, but on managing the emotions of others. Physically, the cost is no less severe. The body keeps score of every burden: chronic fatigue, headaches, back pain, digestive issues. These often arise when the psyche is overloaded with what does not belong to it. Jung believed that the psyche and body are not separate, but two reflections of the same reality. When the unconscious is not listened to, the body speaks. So many physical illnesses are, in some ways, cries from the soul begging us to stop carrying what is not ours. Yet, despite the suffering, many people resist letting go. Why? Because carrying others' pain gives them a sense of meaning. If I am the one who makes you happy, then I am important. If I am the one who saves you, then I matter. This hidden bargain feels safe because it distracts us from facing our own wounds. It is easier to tend to someone else's darkness than to look directly at our own. Jung's concept of shadow integration is relevant here. We carry others' pain as a way to avoid meeting our own. But individuation demands that we turn inward. Until we do, we live as fragments, half alive, never truly ourselves. The moment you set down the burden, change begins to ripple through your life. Imagine walking through a forest carrying a heavy backpack filled not with your belongings, but with rocks handed to you by strangers. You stumble, you sweat, your shoulders ache. Then, one by one, you take the rocks out and place them on the ground. At first it feels strange, guilt whispers, but you promise to carry these. Yet as the weight lightens, you breathe more deeply. You notice the sunlight filtering through the trees. Your steps become steady, and for the first time, you begin to walk at your own pace. This is what it feels like when you stop carrying the pain of others. Your body, mind, and spirit begin to realign with their natural rhythm. Creativity awakens. Relationships shift, some ending, some deepening, but always becoming more authentic. Life itself feels lighter, not because pain disappears, but because you are finally carrying only what is truly yours. It is important to emphasize, letting go does not mean abandonment. You can still be present with love. You can still listen, comfort, and support, but you do so from a place of wholeness, not from enmeshment. You recognize, this sorrow belongs to you, not me. I trust you enough to let you carry it. I will walk beside you, but I will not rob you of your journey. This kind of love is deeper than sacrifice. It honors the sovereignty of both souls. Jung might say it allows the self, the archetype of wholeness, to emerge more fully in each person. As we reflect on this truth, we begin to notice how much of our lives have been shaped by carrying others' burdens. We can trace the line back to childhood, to moments when we were praised for being the strong one, or guilted into silence, or rewarded for fixing problems that were never ours. We can see it in the ways culture glorifies martyrs and caretakers, teaching us that self-sacrifice is the highest form of virtue. And yet, behind the veil of this virtue often lies a broken spirit, a dimmed light. Jung's work invites us to pierce this veil and to realize that true virtue comes not from depletion, but from alignment with our authentic self. To stop carrying their pain is to accept a frightening responsibility, to carry our own. For some, this is the hardest step. As long as we are weighed down by others, we can avoid facing our own shadow. But once we lay down their burdens, we can no longer hide. We must look into the mirror and see ourselves, not the roles, not the rescuer, not the savior, but the raw, vulnerable self we have long neglected. And this, Jung would insist, is the beginning of transformation. To see oneself completely is terrifying, but it is also the doorway to freedom. Beyond that door lies a life where we are not crushed under borrowed weight, but free to dance with the fullness of who we are. The truth is that much of what we call love is often disguised fear. We carry the pain of others because we are afraid of what will happen if we do not. A child fears that if they do not carry their parents' unhappiness, the parent will withdraw love. A partner fears that if they do not absorb their lover's despair, the relationship will collapse. A friend fears that if they set a boundary, they will be abandoned. These fears are ancient, rooted in our primal need for belonging. But in the language of Jung, they are illusions created by complexes, psychic knots tied long ago that we mistake for reality. The complex convinces us that our very survival depends on carrying what is not ours. Only by bringing these unconscious fears into awareness can we free ourselves. Jung often spoke of individuation as the central task of human life, the unfolding of the self, the integration of the conscious and unconscious into a whole. Carrying another's pain interrupts this process because it entangles us in their journey instead of our own. Imagine two rivers flowing side by side. Each has its own course, its own destination. If one river constantly pours into the other, both lose their way. The first becomes depleted, the second becomes flooded, and neither reaches the ocean it was meant for. This is what happens when we confuse compassion with over-identification. The rivers must run alongside each other, not collapse into one another. One of the most insidious ways we carry others' pain is through guilt. Guilt whispers that we are responsible for the suffering of those we love, that their tears are proof of our failure, that their struggles mean we have not done enough. But guilt is often a mask for projection. The suffering of another awakens something in us, perhaps our own unresolved helplessness or shame, and instead of facing it directly, we cover it with guilt and take on burdens we cannot resolve. Jung described guilt not as a moral failing, but as a psychological signal that something within us needs attention. Yet when we misinterpret guilt as responsibility for others, we distort its message and become trapped in endless cycles of carrying. Another common snare is the desire to control. We carry others' pain because we believe that if we manage it for them, we can control the outcome. If I take on your anger, perhaps you will calm down. If I carry your sadness, maybe you will not leave me. Control feels safer than uncertainty. But the truth is that control is an illusion. No one can heal another's wounds or rewrite another's destiny. Jung insisted that each psyche contains its own blueprint for healing, but it must be activated from within. When we interfere, even with the best intentions, we block that inner process. The greatest act of love is not control, but trusting that the other has the strength to face their shadow, just as we must face ours. The weight of carrying is not only emotional but generational. Families unconsciously pass down traumas like heirlooms. A grandfather's unspoken grief becomes the grandson's depression. A mother's suppressed anger becomes the daughter's anxiety. These inherited burdens live within what Jung called the collective unconscious, surfacing in each generation until someone is brave enough to break the cycle. To stop carrying family pain is often the most difficult step of all, because it feels like betrayal. If I do not carry this, am I rejecting my family? Am I dishonoring their suffering? But in reality, releasing inherited pain is the deepest act of love. It says, the cycle ends here. I will not pass it forward. By carrying only what is ours, we free those who came before and those who will come after. Consider how life changes once the burdens are released. A person who has always carried the disappointment of their parents may finally choose a path that feels true, even if it does not earn approval. A partner who has carried the depression of their spouse may rediscover joy, no longer dimming their own light out of fear of outshining the other. A leader who has carried the frustrations of everyone around them may finally say, "This is not mine," and begin to lead with clarity instead of exhaustion. The release is not only psychological, but spiritual. It opens space for the self to emerge, that deeper center of the psyche that Jung described as the guiding principle of wholeness. The self calls us toward authenticity, and it cannot speak clearly when we are crowded with the voices of others' sorrows. Letting go is not easy. The ego resists because it has built an identity around being the carrier. I am the strong one. I am the rescuer. I am the healer. To lay down the burden feels like erasing the self. But this identity is not the true self, it is a mask, a persona. Jung distinguished between the persona, the mask we show the world, and the self, the wholeness that lies beneath. When we cling to the persona of the carrier, we block access to the self. Only by setting down the mask can we discover who we truly are beyond it. This discovery often feels like death before it feels like life. When you stop carrying, you may face resistance from others. Those who depended on you to hold their pain may accuse you of selfishness. Relationships may tremble or even break. But these ruptures are not signs of failure, they are signs of truth. They reveal which connections were built on authenticity and which were built on dependency. In the ashes of what falls away, something new emerges, relationships rooted in freedom, not bondage, love that is chosen, not owed, connection that strengthens rather than depletes. And within yourself, a new landscape appears. Energy that was once consumed by others' burdens becomes available for creativity, joy, and growth. You may find yourself drawn to art, music, writing, or dreams long abandoned. Jung believed that creativity was one of the primary ways the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind. When we stop carrying others' pain, we open the channel for this communication. We begin to live not as shadows of others, but as creators of our own destiny. Life becomes less about survival and more about expression. This is the essence of individuation, becoming who you are, not who others need you to be. Dreams often reflect this transformation. A person who has long carried others may dream of heavy bags, of chains, of endless staircases. But as they release, the dreams shift, birds flying free, rivers flowing, doors opening. Jung placed great importance on dreams as messages from the unconscious, guiding us toward integration. The imagery of release is the soul's way of saying, you are returning to yourself. You are laying down what was never yours. Yet even as we release, compassion remains. Stopping the carrying does not mean closing the heart. In fact, it makes the heart more open, because it is no longer weighed down by confusion. True compassion says, I see your pain. I honor it, but I trust you to hold it, because I believe in your strength. I will not rob you of your journey by taking it from you. This is a love that empowers rather than enables. It is a love that recognizes each soul as sovereign, each path as sacred. Jung might say that it is the love that emerges when we are aligned with the self, not the ego. And so, the journey continues. To stop carrying is not a one-time act, but a practice. Again and again, life will test you. A friend will pour out their despair, and you will feel the old urge to absorb it. A family member will hand you their anger, and you will feel the reflex to take it in. But now you have awareness. You can pause and ask, is this mine? If the answer is no, you can let it pass through you without lodging inside. This is mastery, not cold detachment, but conscious choice. It is the art of standing in love without drowning in it. Over time, this practice reshapes your entire life. The nervous system calms, the body heals, the mind clears, relationships evolve. You begin to feel lighter, freer, more alive. You no longer move through the world as a container for borrowed pain, but as a vessel for your own truth. And in this freedom, you discover something astonishing. The people around you begin to change too. When you stop carrying, you invite them to pick up their own healing. Some will resist, but others will rise. In letting go, you give them the gift of responsibility. And often, that is the greatest gift of all. This is the transformation Jung pointed toward, the movement from unconscious entanglement to conscious individuation. It is the journey from shadow to self, from burden to freedom. And it begins with a simple but radical act, setting down what was never yours to carry. The moment you do, everything changes, not just within you, but all around you. The world itself feels different, because you are seeing it through your own eyes at last, not through the lens of others' sorrows. The forest is brighter. The river flows more clearly. The path ahead is yours, and yours alone. And in that truth, there is peace. There is a strange paradox in the human heart. We long to be free, yet we cling to chains. The chains are familiar. They give us identity. They make us feel useful. To be the one who carries others' pain is to be seen as strong, loyal, dependable. But the cost of these chains is our own wholeness. Jung warned that what is not made conscious will be lived as fate. If we do not recognize the chains we hold, life will play them out again and again, through exhaustion, broken relationships, and cycles of suffering. To be free, we must dare to see what lies beneath the role of the carrier. We must ask, who am I without the burden? This question terrifies the ego. Without the role of rescuer, will anyone love me? Without the mask of strength, will anyone stay? The ego builds entire identities around being indispensable to others, because it fears abandonment. Yet the self whispers a different truth. You are loved not because of what you carry, but because of who you are. Real connection does not demand that you hold another's darkness. It asks only that you stand authentically in your own light. When you let go, those who truly love you will not vanish. They will recognize you more deeply than ever before. And yet, the letting go feels like betrayal. It feels like turning away from those we care about. This is the trick of the shadow. It disguises liberation as abandonment. But the truth is that by carrying what is not ours, we are the ones abandoning ourselves. Jung's work reminds us again and again that wholeness cannot be reached through denial of the self. To heal, we must return to our own center. This is not abandonment of others. It is the only way to truly meet them, not as saviors or victims, but as equals. Think of the child who grows up carrying the sadness of their parents. Perhaps the mother is depressed, or the father is angry. The child learns early, if I am cheerful, if I am quiet, if I take care of their feelings, maybe they will be okay. This pattern becomes a way of life. The adult then enters relationships where they continue the same cycle, always the caretaker, always the one who absorbs. To stop carrying feels impossible, because it is tied to survival. But when that adult finally realizes their sadness was never mine to heal, the chains break. It does not mean they stop loving their parents. It means they stop confusing love with burden. This is the beginning of individuation, the separation of self from the unconscious grip of family complexes. Dreams often reveal this struggle in symbolic form. One person might dream of carrying heavy suitcases through endless airports, never able to put them down. Another might dream of drowning, pulled under by invisible hands. These are the images of the unconscious crying out, "You are carrying too much." And when healing begins, the dreams shift, suitcases are left behind, waters become calm, doors appear where once there were walls. Jung believed that such dreams are messages from the deeper self, guiding us back to balance. They show us not only the weight but the possibility of release. The process of letting go is not always gentle. Sometimes it feels like breaking apart. The body itself often reacts: exhaustion, illness, anxiety. When we finally refuse to carry what is not ours, the nervous system, long accustomed to overwork, trembles. Old fears surface. But these symptoms are not punishment. They are the body recalibrating to a new way of being. Healing is rarely smooth. It is more like shedding a skin. The old identity cracks and peels away, leaving rawness beneath. But in time, the rawness becomes strength. The vulnerability becomes clarity. The new skin is not a mask, but a true reflection of the self. And as the self strengthens, a new relationship to others emerges. No longer entangled in their pain, we can actually see them more clearly. Before, we were blinded by identification, confusing their emotions with our own. Now, with boundaries, compassion sharpens. We can say, "I see your suffering. I am here, but I will not carry it for you." And strangely, this often allows the other person to face themselves more honestly. When we stop rescuing, we create space for others to rise. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not, but in either case, we remain free. This is love without chains. Yet there is another layer, the collective. Jung taught that we are not just individuals, but participants in a larger unconscious, shared by humanity. Much of the pain we carry does not even belong to our families or partners. It belongs to the culture, the world, the archetypes that shape society. For example, many women unconsciously carry the archetypal burden of the mother, believing they must nurture endlessly, sacrifice constantly, even when it destroys them. Many men carry the archetypal weight of the hero, believing they must be strong, stoic, invulnerable, even when it exhausts them. These archetypal roles are powerful, and they live inside us as invisible expectations. To stop carrying means confronting not only personal history, but also collective archetypes. It means daring to say, "I am more than the mother. I am more than the hero. I am myself." This confrontation is revolutionary. It destabilizes the unconscious agreements that hold families, communities, even nations together. But without it, no true individuation can occur. Jung warned that when individuals are swallowed by archetypes, they lose their uniqueness. They become masks of the collective rather than expressions of the self. To step out of the archetype is to reclaim individuality. It does not mean rejecting motherhood or heroism. It means living them consciously, as choices, not prisons. The ripple effect of such individuation is profound. When one person stops carrying, others notice. At first they may resist. "You've changed. You're selfish. You don't care anymore." But beneath the resistance is fear, the fear of facing their own burdens. Yet slowly, the example spreads. One person's freedom gives others permission to seek their own. In this way, individuation is not only personal but cultural. Each person who sets down what is not theirs creates space for a new way of being, a culture less bound by unconscious entanglement and more aligned with authenticity. This is perhaps the greatest gift of Jung's vision, the idea that personal healing contributes to collective evolution. When you stop carrying what is not yours, you do not just free yourself, you shift the unconscious field around you. You break cycles. You open doors. You become a living symbol of another possibility. And symbols, Jung taught, have immense power. They move the soul in ways logic cannot. To live as your authentic self is to become a symbol of freedom for others, even without words. Still, The journey is never final. Again and again, life will tempt you to pick up the old burdens. A parent grows sick, a partner falls into despair, a friend pleads for rescue. The heartaches, the old patterns stir. But now you know the truth. You can love without carrying, support without absorbing, care without losing yourself. Each time you choose this path, the muscles of the soul strengthen, individuation deepens, freedom grows, and the light of the self shines brighter, guiding you forward. At last, you realize that the greatest act of love is not to carry, but to stand in your own truth, fully present, fully alive, to offer your presence as a mirror, not a container, to say with your being, I am me, and you are you. I honor your path, and I honor mine. In this simple yet profound stance lies the essence of what Jung called wholeness. It is not the merging of selves but the meeting of them, not bondage but freedom, not carrying but walking side by side, each strong in their own soul. And when you live this way, life itself changes tone. The world feels less heavy, less hostile. The trees seem greener, the sky wider, the air easier to breathe. You are no longer dragging invisible chains, but moving with the rhythm of your own being. Dreams guide you, creativity flows, love expands. Pain still comes, life will always bring suffering, but it is no longer doubled by the weight of what is not yours. You meet your pain with courage, and you allow others to meet theirs. And in this balance, something holy appears, the sacredness of each individual journey, honored without confusion, embraced without fear. This is the heart of the message. You were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to live, to create, to love freely. To stop carrying what is not yours is not cruelty, it is courage. It is the door to the self, the return to authenticity, the awakening of the soul. And when you walk through that door, you do not just free yourself, you light the path for others, showing them that they, too, can lay down the weight and finally come home to themselves. When you stop carrying the pain of others, you finally return to yourself. This is not selfishness, it is freedom. Love is not about losing yourself, but about standing in truth. Carl Jung taught us that everything changes the moment you release what was never yours. So today, choose freedom, choose authenticity. And if this message touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel for more life-changing inspiration. Together, let's walk lighter, freer, and truer than ever before.